one of you is the monster.
Monster? They're British, you know.
Hello, I'm Chris Denton.
And I'm Paul Monk. And we are a
very British horror.
Right, so today, episode 1, what are we covering, Chris?
We are covering Hammer's Dracula.
Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll talk for a little bit about the film and things like the characters, the themes, that kind of thing. And then I think we'll end the episode by asking 3 very important questions, which is, firstly, did we like it? Secondly, does it hold up today? And thirdly, is it scary?
Ooh.
Okay, so just a quick word that obviously, although this is a very, very old film, we're obviously going to spoiler it. So if you haven't seen the film, why not? You should be going to see it, just so that you know what the hell we're talking about, for a start.
Yes. And when you do watch it, don't be surprised when Dracula dies at the end.
Like I said, spoilers. That was a very big one. But yes, I mean, what might surprise them though is Van Helsing doing a little jig as he dances away from killing Dracula at the end.
It's amazing stuff, but
yes.
Let's get to that in time.
Okay, so Dracula, I think one of the very first things we probably need to discuss, which is quite important, is the film versus the novel.
Yes.
And it's because the film is obviously very different.
Well, it's fantastically abbreviated to about 80 minutes, or
I think it might even be slightly less than that.
Yeah, and in order to get the story distilled to that form, as well as to save money, Hammer truncated it. There's no voyage to England. There's no English section at all. I mean, Dracula gets on a coach and goes to the next town where Arthur Holmwood and all the other characters are.
His ambitions are a little bit low in this, aren't they? He's not aiming very high.
He's not interested in swinging London.
No, that comes later.
Yes. But actually, what comes through is that the story actually benefits from some of this. So it's not really an epic. I mean, the kind of changing of geographical locations and the sweep of the original story. I mean, that was just to get Dracula the vampire into London for British readers, but you don't really. It doesn't need to be set in London or Whitby at all. It holds up perfectly. No. I mean, it's a bit odd. These British characters in Central Europe.
It's a kind of a very British expat part of Germany or Austria or wherever it is it's meant to be set. I'm not entirely sure exactly where it's meant to be set, but so I think it's quite interesting. One of the things that first struck me about it was the character of Jonathan Harker.
Oh yes.
Who initially, when I was watching it, initially he turns up at Dracula's castle and he's
as in the book,
but he's a librarian, or is he a librarian? But anyway, he turns up saying he's a librarian, which got me thinking, well, no, that's not right. He wasn't a librarian.
Why would Dracula need a librarian?
Exactly.
But
I mean, does he need someone to just go shh if Dracula's being a bit too loud in his library? Or
apparently so. Yeah. Anyway, Dracula is the victim of a scam because Harker is not really a librarian at all.
No, he's not. And what was quite interesting is that he turns out that he actually knows all about Dracula. Unlike Jonathan Harker in the novel, who's totally unsuspecting of everything, he's actually come to the castle with the intense purposes of killing Dracula. But I thought it was quite interesting because it's not made very obvious that he knows. There was one point when I was watching it where he goes from being just generally like the novel Harker and just generally kind of thinking things are a bit odd. So there's one bit where Dracula goes out, and I think he's locked Harker in his bedroom again, like in a novel. And then all of a sudden, Harker's writing in his diary saying about how this evil monster's reign must come to an end, and all of this. And I was thinking, hang on, he hasn't done anything. Okay, he's locked you in your room, and he's gone out for the night. But is that really cause to pretend that to think he's some sort of horrible monster?
And this is Hammer's nod to popular culture, isn't it? I mean, in the 30s version of Dracula, which we're not specifically going to be talking about, but in that came out, it was still just about possible that the audience wouldn't know who Dracula was.
Yeah.
But by the Hammer remake, it's just pointless setting up Dracula as a vampire. It's not going to be a surprise to anyone. So instead of that, you get Dracula as a really nice guy. Like, I mean, he's quite decent to Harker at that stage. The locked door is about the only dodgy thing.
Exactly. Okay, he does have a kind of blood-sucking lady vampire lurking around somewhere, but that's the only sign. She turns up and says, "Oh, help me! I need to escape." Which, obviously, if you turn up as a guest at somebody's house and there's somebody else there who comes up to you and says, "Help me! I need to escape," or whatever, you would maybe think, perhaps this is a bit of a weird place that I might not want to stay here for very long. But it's hardly cause for calling him a monster, especially as Dracula is quite. I mean, apart from obviously being quite theatrical in the cloak, he's quite a sort of decent fella at the beginning.
And that's also a change. Obviously, there's one Bride of Dracula in this as opposed to 3 in the book. But
that's probably running time.
Well, and
budget,
exactly. But the change that isn't is that she hates Dracula. Whereas the brides in the book don't.
No, that's true.
Which is interesting. It's kind of a kind of self-loathing that maybe comes with addiction, which I think is already in the first 5 minutes setting up where Jimmy Sangster's going with vampirism.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads us nicely on then to the whole idea of the vampires in the film, because they're quite interesting. They're less supernatural than in other vampire films. I mean, it's stated in there Dracula can't turn himself into any animals or mist or anything like that. In fact, actually, there's a very good bit later on where they're all very sure of that, and then suddenly there's a scream in the house, and they're all saying, "Oh, well, how's he got in?" And basically, he's been lurking downstairs for the whole day. Which must have been quite interesting for him. I kind of wonder what he was doing. I suppose sleeping.
Yeah, I mean that takes us to the end.
How anyone didn't find out. Anyway, we're sort of skipping ahead a little bit here,
but I mean you're right. He's obviously strong, but it's not immediately obvious what other powers he has, if any. So that's quite interesting. And I think nothing proves that to be a good decision like subsequent Hammer movies that tried to reintroduce the supernatural elements and didn't realise them very well.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of a, we can do the fangs, that's fine. They can do that, but turning him into a bat or to a mist or to a horde of rats, that would be very expensive. We can't do that very well. So let's not even try. So I like the way that Jimmy Sangster, because I'm crediting him for a lot of this.
Yeah.
He realised he wouldn't be able to afford or even would be allowed the running time to do the book as written, but he's abridged it and kept the essence really nicely and kept the budget down. I mean, it looks expensive. It wasn't, but it looks expensive. But I think one of the reasons it looks expensive is because they never fail to realise anything. Well, mostly never fail to realise anything. I think if you watch the beginning closely, there are some, that stream, that raging torrent of a mountain stream. Otherwise, fairly obviously some kind of water feature from a garden turned on its side.
There's someone with a sort of a hose pipe attached to a tap, just offset, shot, just running the water along.
And given that they filmed it next to the Thames, you've got to be impressed by the way that they didn't have a stream, or anything like that outside Dracula's castle, despite the script saying there was one.
Yeah, you can imagine trying to film on that stretch of the Thames. There's some people rowing past in a boat, and that kind of thing.
I can though think of a very good sequence from Curse of Frankenstein by a lake. So, it wasn't impossible to realise that a bit more effectively. But it's a small niggle. It doesn't ruin it, but the rest of the cast was really very good, I think. This is the advantage of Brave Studios, I think. It looked a lot like Dracula's castle anyway.
Yeah.
Which certainly helped them.
Yeah. And Brave Studios is somewhere we'll get quite familiar with in other Hammer films, and you'll get to be able to spot the bit of Brave Studios that's been redressed. But they always do it very well, and it always ends up looking quite.
I think so, and I believe
good.
Dracula was the first time they actually had a soundstage, a proper studio, sort of Hollywood grade soundstage to work on, as well as just a big house.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think the next bit then is probably to talk about some of the characters and how certain characters are portrayed.
So we covered Dracula. He's nice.
Well, I don't know.
Well, he's nice. I like him, and then he turns a bit bad and never says another word. Bad.
Well, he's quite interesting in that all the time. To elaborate on that, all the time he's got his mask up of being a nice aristocratic gentleman. That he is very talkative, and he talks quite normally. There's none of this kind of over the top pronunciation or anything, and seems quite normal. But as soon as that mask goes down, you're right, he doesn't say another word. As soon as he is Dracula the monster, that's it. But he totally sells it in terms of that kind of presence he has.
It's very physical acting.
Yeah. Well, basically the moment in the castle where Dracula returns back, and he makes that entrance, there's that really energetic leap over the table, which is very different from any other portrayal of Dracula we've seen.
Yeah.
And certainly the Universal Dracula was very sedentary and static and a bit dull.
The man played. I mean, Bela Lugosi was pretty old when he did it. Yeah, and that didn't stretch to action. And there's some great action.
And of course, do you want to talk about the sex element of it? Something that's very different from any other previous Dracula type horror film is.
Yeah, what is really cool is that Dracula seems to be. I mean, all his victims obviously love Dracula. I mean, but also, also hate him. The bride. They can't stop themselves.
Yeah,
they physically can't. Like an addiction. And once he's like one hit and you're hooked. I think so. Once he's got them once, then after that they help him. They hide him in their house or open the curtains and open the windows and say, "Come and get me, big boy." And it is as obvious as that in the film.
No, that's right, and they do that.
And they're obviously. I mean, the women are portrayed as being quite turned on by the whole thing, as is Dracula, with his bloodshot eyes, and it's obvious what that's supposed to be. And
is it?
Well, it is now. It is now.
No, I don't get that.
Right, I'm not. Yeah,
It's okay, I'm kidding.
Paul's trying to lure me into saying that when Dracula's eyes are bloodshot, it's because he's got an erection, but only psychoanalytically, not like literally.
That's disgusting. I had no idea when I was watching this film that it was so filthy.
But yeah, I mean, it was probably that was what made the film shocking at the time. I mean, the blood red, I think a little bit maybe, but I think it's the sex. I think that's why it was regarded at the time as like X certificate. This is really awful thing.
Well, we'll carry on with a bit of the characters, but later on I do have some reviews that were around at the time.
Very, very weird. Through a prism of today, you just wonder what the hell these people were on. But different times. Yeah. But the next character, to go seamlessly back on topic, Van Helsing.
Yes.
He's, really interesting because he's not Dutch.
He's not Dutch.
Or not obviously Dutch.
He doesn't have a van.
he's an action hero.
Can I just this was the one thing I think that struck me most about this film. It's almost less of a horror film and more of an action film in some ways.
Certainly now, that's the way you almost have to view it.
Yeah.
And Van very physical. I mean, he knows all the stuff about vampires, but I mean, he's not.
Again, he's a character that's very different from the book and previous film versions.
Yeah. I hate the way that Edward Van Sloan plays him.
That's right.
I hate that. No, but
but even in the book, he's a lot like that, isn't he? He's more scholarly and less of an action hero. So in fact, it is Hammer and Peter Cushing who have to blame for films like the Van Helsing film with Hugh Jackman,
which I hated.
Yes.
But
and Anthony Hopkins' portrayal in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula.
Well, I didn't like that film, but I don't so much mind him in that.
But the whole kind of Van Helsing as a grizzled kind of vampire hunter type thing definitely stems from this film.
I think it definitely does. And there aren't very many portrayals afterwards of how it's done in the book. I think Olivier in the 70s Dracula, I think he had a crack at it and does the Dutch accent and stuff. But yeah, mostly this is the blueprint.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because it's a star role. It doesn't resemble Van Helsing in the book at all because I think it's just supposed to be Peter Cushing. It's a movie action role for him. In Curse of Frankenstein, he's acting, but in this is like a real movie star part. I think there's not really any acting involved.
No,
and I think you can see from Hammer's publicity that that's what they thought their selling point was. It's Peter Cushing in Dracula on the posters and stuff. I think obviously Curse of Frankenstein had made him a movie star and he'd been a big TV star before that, and he was the name. And so I can see what they were doing, and it works spectacularly well when you think of the horror greats. Cushing, and then Lee, and then Price, and maybe one or two others. And that, Curse of Frankenstein and Dracula set Cushing up for the rest of his career. So that works as well. And I think we really enjoy watching Cushing play Cushing, or slight variations on Cushing.
Well, you're sort of saying that he doesn't act, and I know you don't necessarily mean that because that sounds like that's quite harsh. But there are a couple of things.
That's different. I think a movie star kind of role is like Cary Grant or James Stewart or someone like that is different kind of acting to like real Shakespearean acting or character acting, both of which Cushing could do as well.
Yes, yeah. But, one of the things I think Cushing does do quite well. He's quite he's quite matter of fact throughout all of this. He sort of turns up and says, "Right, this is what you got to do. You got to listen to me because I'm an authority on this." And
people go, well, mostly they accept it. I mean, the Homers take a little bit of persuasion,
Yeah.
but mostly everyone does what he tells them because he's got that.
exactly. And he sort of does that. But there was one moment where I think he Cushing really portrays the horror really well, and it's the point where he's having to stake Jonathan Harker, who's now a vampire.
Oh yeah.
And he does an expression in that where you can just because again, one of the accusations of this film is that it's very bloody and all that kind of thing, and it actually isn't. Apart from like the blood fairly early on, on the fangs and when they stake the female vampire, there's not an awful lot else blood-wise in it. But when he stakes Harker, they cut away from the actual staking bit to view Cushing's face, and he really sells it for me anyway. There's the expression at that point that he's having a hard time killing his friend,
and this is the point in when considering the film that you want to pretend you don't know anything about psychoanalysis and that kind of reading, because all this staking and yeah.
Do you need to take a cold shower?
No. But yes, that's good. That's good horror, and it's interesting that I think Harker's Dracula's only male victim.
Yeah.
And it's obviously done through necessity.
Yeah.
It's interesting you don't see that, and there's no.
No, and you don't see. Yeah, like you say, you don't see the staking.
No. So it's interesting, and I don't think Hammer wanted to go down that road at all.
No.
So for the plot, they had to do it, but really they wanted Dracula's victims to be women because they made it a lot easier for them.
Well, I wonder if there was much. You do wonder whether there was that subtext was actually sort of deliberately there, or whether it was just something that came out because that was.
So I think
it was just seen that having pretty ladies is a way of being victims was what should happen.
I think it is. I think it was. I mean, it obviously was deliberate with Dracula and the biting, and the what's not possibly deliberate is the kind of obvious metaphor for sex that staking is.
Yeah.
Because I think probably at that point Hammer were like, no, this is we're just killing the bad guys. That's fine. We're just killing the bad guys. This is just how you kill the bad guys.
Exactly.
It's like afterwards you just go, what? That's quite phallic, though, isn't it? No, it's not phallic. We're just killing the bad guys. Yeah. So, yeah. I think that I don't think they ever really understood the symbolism of that. And there's in Dracula, Prince of Darkness, there's a scene where a load of monks stake to death the vampire woman, and you just think, oh, that just makes me feel awful. That's just like, it's so anyway,
either that or you just have a filthy mind.
yeah, that's a fair comment.
One thing I thought was quite interesting about Van Helsing, there were two rather odd little things or silly things that sort of struck me about Van Helsing. Firstly is the relationship between Van Helsing and Harker, because clearly they have been working together in some sort of vampire hunting gang. And I sort of wonder if there'd be any kind of mileage in a prequel to that, like Harker and Helsing.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Vampire hunters.
Yeah.
Or like,
maybe
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but with
it's interesting because
two middle-aged men.
In the novel, Dr. Seward has got a kind of relationship, a sort of mentor and student relationship with Van Helsing. It's not obviously vampire hunting until they start hunting Dracula, but it's kind of that sort of relationship's been transferred to Harker, and the character of Dr. Seward in the Hammer film is it's just a normal doctor minor character
with some terrible lines.
Yeah, and just going, I think it's anemia, but it isn't anemia, but I think it is. She'll be fine. Yeah, yeah. But much more interesting. Arthur, Holmwood, and then Mina and Lucy. They're very interesting.
Before we go into them, there was just one more thing with Van Helsing that I
Okay.
kind of thought was a little silly and a bit ridiculous, which is the bit where Van Helsing is in his hotel room or study or whatever he is. I can't remember exactly where he is.
I think it's a hotel. Yeah.
But he's got the wax cylinder, and he's listening to his own voice explaining how to kill a vampire. Now, clearly that's in the script so that us, the viewers, will go, oh, well, we know how this is going to be killed now. But why is Van Helsing sitting in a hotel room listening to his own voice telling him things he already knows?
And
either that or he just has like short-term memory loss or something a lot of the time and has to keep reminding himself.
but that's all right because Catweasel comes in and is confused.
Oh, yes, that's true. Actually, I had that there. I had a point in my notes where he comes in and I've just put Catweasel.
Exactly, Jeffrey Belden. Yes, cameos as some kind of page boy, or not page boy. That's the wedding thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whatever's
He's
hospital,
a sort of
not hospital, hotel porter.
He's a sort of porter type character, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
but maybe that was put there because it was like, okay, this is a bit of a stupid way of getting some exposition across quickly. Let's play with the fact it's stupid and just have someone bemused by it.
Yeah.
But
but it doesn't make any sense.
No, but it is very effective.
I mean, it's a big info dump basically.
Well,
for the viewers.
And the wax cylinders are a bit funny, and then Catweasel is funny. So
exactly. Just on a side note on that, I don't think we need to go into the characters in very much depth, but it's quite interesting in that in this film there's a little bit of a class thing going on, and all the sort of more middle upper class characters are all very kind of serious. But anytime there's a working class character on there, they're totally played for laughs because you've got the guy who's the border.
The corrupt border guy,
yeah, and he's just played totally for laughs. I mean, that's just ridiculous comedy slapstick. And again with the porter in the hotel, and so yeah,
and then the maid, what was her name, Goethe?
Yeah.
I mean, she's not played for laughs, but she's not treated as a proper character. Yeah.
No, exactly. And again, there's like a crazy innkeeper in the in as well, who isn't Michael Ripper, but
no, George Woodbridge, is it?
Yeah, but he's just like a ridiculous simpleton who you think, how can he run an inn of any kind? And it was an interesting thing to note, and I'm sure we will see that in other films of the period. I think that was quite a normal thing to do. Interestingly, Dr. Saywood is almost played as a bit of a comedy character as well. He actually has a very funny line, which I think it's him anyway. I wrote down. I'll see if I can find it now. But he comes in, I think, and just after the Goethe's son or whatever or daughter has been killed, and he says something about I think there's been a bereavement or something, or I can't remember the exact line. I did write it down somewhere, but again, that was played for laughs. That was quite a sort of funny line, I thought.
In Jimmy Sangster's book, he says that his plan for Seawood was that he was actually going to be a negative character, very officious and arrogant and unpleasant, and in the end he changed it because it would have taken too long to set up a character like that.
Yeah.
So maybe brevity is again a reason, but I think it is odd because he's a proper character in the book.
Yeah, well, I guess it's just time and the fact that you're trying to introduce another character, and I mean it's why go to all the trouble of making him a proper character, because there isn't time to do anything with him. Well, there is also an Undertaker as well, who's a comedy character.
Miles Malleson.
Yeah, we'll see, whose name will pop up a few times.
That's a good scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's got quite a good payoff. No, I like him. I think he's very good at comedy scenes in quite dark films.
Yeah.
Good actor, Miles Malleson. But can we move on to Arthur and?
Yes. Sorry.
Lucy. Well, let's start with Lucy, because she's almost a schoolgirl with her hair in plaits. She's very young. Too young for Harker, I think.
Yeah.
But I like the way that she's portrayed. Not a million miles actually from the way Sadie Frost plays Lucy in the Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Yeah.
But it's a nice sort of cameo performance, and she meets her end in the traditional way, in quite a traditional version of that scene actually. So I like the way that Lucy's portrayed, and I like the way that Arthur and Mina are portrayed. But it's interesting that they're an older married couple.
Yeah.
And so Arthur is this, played brilliantly by Michael Gough, is kind of middle-aged man and quite resistant to Van Helsing at the beginning, and he obviously thinks he's a fraud, although with what happens to Lucy, he becomes his sidekick in the traditional way again. And Mina is interesting, just because of the slant. I think she's nice, and they do the sexist thing of, let's keep Mina well away from this, and of course that just lets Dracula in. That's fine. But she's because she's slightly older than the character in the book. She does seem a little bit stronger and less helpless, and I kind of like that. I'm not saying she's a feminist icon, but I think
she's not quite such a pushover.
I think it works. And, I don't know if you want to talk about this now, but what I find strange is that Michael Gough didn't have the kind of career that Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing had after. Because look at this film, he could easily have been him as well. I guess maybe it's a thankless role. Maybe that's the problem. It's not really. He's not really a hero, is he?
He's actually. As a character, he's kind of a bit average and a bit ordinary.
Yeah. Well,
he's sort of like an ordinary person who lots of extraordinary things happen.
And he's a bit too up himself to be really likable. And I think because he was in Phantom of the Opera, wasn't he, playing a baddie, and he's thoroughly unlikable in that. And I just think maybe you don't enjoy his performance so much because it's good. He does it well, but it's not the kind of thing that people really like. It's not like Vincent Price camping it up, is it? It's a much more played down. I love Michael Gough. I think he was brilliant. I know he did make other horror films, but it was actually quite difficult to make people's horror stars like Cushing and Lee were made. But we could have done with a few more. It would have been nice if he had been one of them.
Yeah.
Have we covered all the characters?
Yeah, I think so.
Because I know what I want to talk about.
Okay, go on then.
Okay, so the tremendous action scene at the end, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And then Dracula is defeated and vaporized, and then it's very efficient the way that once that happens, you just got Van Helsing just comes out, doesn't he? I think, and there's a hug between Mina and Arthur, and that's it. It's over, finished. And I think Hammer had terrible trouble working out how to follow it.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting, really interesting is that Jimmy Sangster, who was commissioned to do a sequel immediately, he came up with this thing called Revenge of Dracula, which was basically another hour and a half of the same kind of thing, with Van Helsing going up against Christopher Lee as Dracula. And Hammer, for whatever reason, didn't want to do that, and then they came up with they went and did Brides
of Dracula,
which
doesn't have Dracula in.
Yes, indeed, and which frankly isn't. I mean, it's fine, and it's got Peter Cushing's Van Helsing, but I think this is the point.
It does have an interesting use of a windmill.
It does have an interesting use of a windmill, and it's got good things about it. But don't you think it's the point when, Hammer realised that Dracula is not really successful just because Peter Cushing's the star of it?
Yeah,
because you could put Peter Cushing again as the big action star again in a very similar kind of film, and it's not a big hit because there's no Christopher Lee in it.
Yeah,
and of course, what Hammer did eventually was dusted off Revenge of Dracula, wrote out Van Helsing for some reason. Well, obviously for budget reasons, and then so put Father Shandor in instead, and made that, and that was a tremendous success. That was really good, and then you can see, well, at this point they understand that it's Christopher Lee's Dracula that is holding this together. Much as I love Peter Cushing's performance, I think it's this Dracula that people liked, and it's Dracula that they wanted to see more of, not necessarily Van Helsing, although he eventually does come back as well. But and Christopher Lee obviously felt trapped in the role. That's everyone knows that. Yeah. But it took Hammer a long time. It really did. If you look at the period Hammer were active, what a big gap there is between Dracula and Prince of Darkness. And then
what's that? Something like about 8 years or something.
I think so. And then basically Hammer then did a Dracula film every year until Christopher Lee said no, and then they did another Dracula film with Kung Fu without Christopher Lee, and then they went bankrupt. That's the truncated history there. So Christopher Lee was such a massive part of the success of this film, although he's not even in it that much.
I was quite shocked how little he seems to be in it.
But
he does lots of dramatic entrances as well. I've noticed
he appears at doorways, doesn't he?
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Yeah. There was one scene where he I think quite earlier on, where he's in his coffin, and then it's right early on when Harker's staking the woman, and then he wakes up and Harker turns round and he's not in his coffin anymore, but then he appears at the doorway, which is like one of those moments where he obviously likes entrances in doorways and appearing dramatically at doorways, because why would you do that?
It's very weird. It is weird. I mean, it's a good shot of the empty coffin, but it shouldn't really be. It should be just Dracula. Shouldn't it?
But then, getting back to the ending, I think the ending is great. I love the fact it's quite action packed. It's not as long as I remembered it. I mean, Van Helsing dispatches Dracula quite sort of efficiently. And for some reason I thought I always had a memory of it. This is probably because this happens a lot in Hammer films. I had a memory of the house burning down. No, which of course it doesn't.
No, that does happen a lot in Hammer films, but I think they hadn't established that cliche yet. The windmill burns down, doesn't it?
I think it might do.
Yeah. So my bride said worked out you had to burn down the building at the end. But.
And the effects I think work very well. I mean, the bit where Dracula's foot disintegrates? Is it his foot that gets caught in the sunlight and disintegrates? And again, a great performance from Christopher Lee, as a sort of slight look of terror on his face. And just Cushing being energetic and running along the table and pulling the curtains down, and then there's the bit of the candlesticks being the crucifix.
Oh, I love that.
And it was just really great, but over really quickly, which is no bad thing, because it sort of, I think there's a tendency later on for in horror films for the monster to appear to be killed and then come back and then appear to be killed again and then come back. And I think it's quite refreshing that Van Helsing just gets on with the job and does it. Also, another little kind of interesting thing I noted was that when Dracula dies, there's a kind of symbol on the floor, a big pattern, which has lots of, I think it has a lot of signs of the zodiac and that kind of thing. And sure, this isn't at all intentional, but where Dracula dies, he dies over the sign of Aquarius, which of course is water. And what is his downfall in the next film? Incidentally, spoilers for Prince of Darkness.
It's running water.
So yeah, I'm sure that wasn't intentional. But I did pick up on that. I thought
what I love particularly,
quite funny.
I agree with you. But what I love particularly about that same shot of maybe the shot just after of the wind blowing the dust away over that floor pattern of some description.
Yeah.
Is that the end of Flash Gordon copied it?
Exactly. I was thinking exactly the same thing. I was half expecting Max von Sydow to go.
Yeah. Just one of very many amazing things about Flash Gordon. But,
yes.
Yeah. And obviously that sequence is used in the beginning of Prince of Darkness.
It is, yeah.
Though Jimmy Sangster claims it's to pad out the running time, but it does work quite effectively, and it was quite a big gap on screen, as we said. So it was a good idea to have a recap. Although it would have worked even more effectively if Van Helsing had then been a character in the film. Not I've got anything against Andrew Keir and Father Shandor.
Yeah, no, he's quite a reasonably interesting character. Okay, so if we move on now, because earlier on I was talking about the reviews at the time and how. Just a little bit about how the film was received at the time. Interesting enough, most of the reviews seem to be quite negative, drawing on lots of saying it's disgusting or whatever. But apparently it was quite interesting in that apparently it set a British record, a record for British attendance at the cinema in less than a month.
I'm sure these two things are totally related.
So it obviously was really popular with everybody, but less popular with the critics. So
well, I mean, if a critic says this is the most explicit, the most disgusting film I've ever seen, of course people are going to go in droves.
Exactly. So apparently this is one review I found. It was someone called Nina Hibbin from the Daily Worker, whatever horrible rag that was. But she said, "I went to see Dracula, a Hammer film, prepared to enjoy a nervous giggle. I was even ready to poke gentle fun at it. I came away revolted and outraged. This film disgusts the mind and repels the senses. Laughable nonsense? Not when it is filmed like this, with realism and the modern convenience of colour and the widescreen. This film is a degradation of cinema entertainment."
It's the sex. That's what she doesn't like.
So yes, I think that's it. I think it can't be the blood, because well, maybe it was, because they hadn't really seen an awful lot like that. But she was
going along expecting like a Universal, a latter day Universal.
So she was going along
Abbott
thinking
and
to have a
Costello
laugh
meet
at it.
Dracula, and then it's not like that. So she's upset. Well,
but to be fair, I think that to get that reaction, the film's achieved its goal, because the Universal Studios films that were being made up until that point had become a laughing stock, had become exactly what she says there, just an excuse to go along and poke fun and giggle at them. And so I think this is what Hammer achieves so well with this and with Curse of Frankenstein, is that they make that genre serious again.
And even now, you can't laugh at this film.
No,
it's a good film. It stands up. You can't laugh at the creaky scenery or the dodgy performances or the bad writing or the terrible special effects, because none of those things are true. There's nothing funny about it. It's still everything, because everything just works. It's not so bad. It's good. It's just good.
Yeah, there was another review from the Daily Telegraph, this just a short one, said, "This British film has an X certificate. This is too good for it. There should be a new certificate, S for sadistic or just D for disgusting."
It's the sex again.
It is, yeah. So it's obviously prudishness.
I think so. I mean, there may be an element of the gore, but there's practically none, is there? It's just
No, like, yeah. I mean, it would have been, they wouldn't be, audiences wouldn't have been used to that gore, that level of blood.
well, and there's a
on
suggestion.
there.
I mean, I know a lot later, Halloween was regarded as being really gory, and
Yeah,
and,
there's
and yet
absolutely no blood in
it's
Halloween.
suggestion. It's just the effective direction, and we know we haven't mentioned him yet, but we know Terence Fisher could do a good job. He was a good director.
Yeah,
He could make people think they'd seen stuff they hadn't seen, and so there's
of
probably
course.
an element of these critics thinking that they've seen vampires rip people's throats out and
Yeah.
things like that when they just haven't, especially if they're not used to that kind of to this kind
Yeah.
of cinema. But I still think it's basically the sex.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that most of the gore is fairly early on, even from the opening titles, where Dracula is on that headstone. It's splattered with blood, and so I think it kind of sets you up to think that this is full of blood, and actually it isn't.
Which is not a bad way to do it.
No.
By the way, the beginning of the novel is absolutely horrible.
Yes.
There's like a baby in a bag that Dracula feeds to the brides, and that's awful. And that's I think Stoker was pretty good at horror, and I think Hammer very wisely didn't actually go down that direction, because that would have been really horrible. But obviously they couldn't do that. But this film isn't really horrible like that image is.
No.
But I think and we're going to talk about at the end whether this is scary or not. But like you've already said, this is more like an action film.
Yeah.
Well, some of the things that are really horrible in the book like that aren't in the film. It's more chasing and knowing he's establishing him as a threat so they can run after him.
Okay, well then I think that nicely brings us to just wrapping it up with the final three questions. So did you like it? Did you like this film?
I think on balance, yes. And when I say on balance, I mean it's practically my favourite film.
Well, I enjoyed it loads as well. I mean, I haven't seen it for quite some time, and it was just really enjoyable and good fun. More of an action film though, which was quite interesting. But yeah, no, I enjoyed it a lot. So, do you think that generally it would hold up today for a modern audience, or do you think it's a little bit too tame, ironically, given the reviews earlier?
I think it holds up as an action film, like you say. I mean, what's your next question?
Okay, is it scary?
No,
not at all.
No, it's not scary. Tastes have moved on. Things have just got,
Yeah.
I mean, a ghost story from this time might still be scary, but something that relies on a sort of visceral horror is just not going to do it, is it?
There's plenty of creepy films around that sort of time that still hold up, that still I can still watch and be creeped out by. But this isn't one of them. I mean, it's action all the way.
I think
pretty much from the word go, and that's great, and that's. I
think
don't have any
that's
problem
why
with that.
This film remains so good, because it works as an action film, so modern audiences like us even can enjoy it.
Okay. Next episode, we're going to do a teaser for what we might be covering next episode.
I think what we're going to cover is Nigel Neal related. How's that for a teaser?
That sounds good.
And it's not Quatermass.
No.
We'll
leave it at that, shall we?
Let's leave it at that.
Okay, right. Well, thank you all for listening. Just if you want to find us lurking on the web, you can find us at averybritishhorror.blogspot.com. Get that right. On Twitter at verybritHorror, or just search for A Very British Horror on Facebook. And feel free to join in, comment on the episode, whether you agree or disagree with things we've talked about. And hopefully you'll join in. I don't know. Hopefully I'll come up with a better ending.
I've been Chris Denton.
And I'm Paul Monk.
Hey, that doesn't match. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and goodbye.